On the evening of January 15th, 2007, in the quiet village of Iwakura Hatayada-cho, a young man named Aishi was riding his bicycle home. On a narrow road that cut through the fields, he noticed something unusual. At the edge of the road stood a bicycle, and next to it a stranger was sitting on the ground, turned away from him. The man's face was shrouded in darkness, but something about his posture struck Aishi as unsettling. At first, Aishi pedaled past the scene, but an uneasy feeling lingered. After 30 seconds, he stopped and decided to turn back, determined to check if the man was all right. However, when he returned, neither the man nor any trace of his presence could be found. Only the bicycle remained, standing exactly where Aishi had first seen it. This encounter was etched into Aishi's memory forever. Who was that man? Why did he disappear so quickly? Had something happened to him, or had he simply left? These questions remained unanswered, but from that day on, the village of Iwakura Hatayada-cho carried its own mystery, one that is still talked about by its residents. Just as Aishi was about to leave, he noticed another figure lying on the ground by the road, in the field. It was a young man, moaning in pain, his clothes soaked in blood. At a glance, it was clear his injuries were severe. His chest and abdomen were slashed with dozens of knife wounds. Beside him lay a mobile phone, as if he had been trying to call for help. When he saw Aishi, the wounded man managed to utter with great difficulty, "I've been stabbed multiple times. Please call an ambulance." 10 minutes later, an ambulance arrived at the scene and the injured man was rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, due to severe blood loss, he passed away shortly afterward. Before his death, as paramedics administered first aid, he managed to say, "A stranger attacked me." The crime scene was left littered with bloodstains and numerous shoe prints belonging to both the victim and the presumed attacker. It was later revealed that the deceased was 20-year-old Chiba Daisaku, a first-year student in the manga department at Kyoto Seika University, one of Japan's most prestigious universities specializing in manga studies. Chiba had earned his place there after overcoming tough competition and was known as a diligent and hardworking student. On the day of the tragedy, Chiba had stayed late at the university to work on his project. He left the campus around 7:40 p.m. after bidding farewell to his friends. The winter evening had already wrapped the surroundings in darkness, and the area was characteristically quiet. Chiba rode his bicycle home along a narrow path bordered by a field, which lay approximately 1.5 meters below the road level. According to Japan's traffic regulations, cyclists are required to ride on the left side of the road. However, due to the deserted streets that evening, Chiba was riding on the right side of the sidewalk. The road was wide enough for two bicycles to pass each other. At some point, another cyclist appeared, traveling on the left side of the road. They found themselves face to face. Suddenly, the man on the other bicycle began angrily protesting, demanding to know why Chiba was breaking traffic rules. A heated argument ensued, prompting both to stop and confront each other. Opposite Chiba stood a man dressed in black, with neatly combed straight hair parted precisely 50-50. His appearance was striking, but his behavior was even more peculiar. After stepping off his bicycle, he suddenly began hurling insults at Chiba. The situation felt utterly absurd. He seemed to have flown into a rage over a trivial matter. What made it even stranger was the man's unsteady demeanor. He swayed from side to side as though unable to maintain his balance. Yelling hurtful words, he began slowly advancing toward Chiba. What happened next between them remains unclear. Witnesses who later testified claimed that Chiba tried to avoid looking directly at the strange man, lowering his head and attempting to defuse the situation. However, this did not stop the attacker. At some point, the man pulled out a knife with a blade approximately 2 centimeters wide. Seeing the weapon, Chiba panicked and ran downhill toward the field, hoping to escape the aggressor. But the man gave chase. Chiba's attempt to flee was short-lived. The assailant caught up to him in the field and inflicted numerous stab wounds to his chest and back. Afterward, the attacker climbed back up to the road, where he crouched and silently watched Chiba as he lay dying, making no effort to flee or offer help. Chiba was discovered by Aishi at 7:45 p.m., just 5 minutes after he had bid farewell to his friends at the university and started his bike ride home. The location of the attack was right next to the road. The field lay below street level, with residential houses nearby. The police theorized that the murder was impulsive, as there appeared to be no clear motive. The attacker's erratic behavior, swaying movements, and incoherent shouting suggested the possibility of a mental disorder. However, the fact that he was traveling through the village on a bicycle led investigators to believe he might be a local resident. This also ruled out robbery as a motive. Chiba's wallet and cash were left untouched. The murder weapon, a small knife, was never found, making DNA analysis impossible and significantly complicating the investigation. Although the village was considered a relatively safe place, the incident sent shockwaves through the local community. Near the houses close to the crime scene were windows that faced directly toward where the attack occurred. The road where the murder took place was a common route for students from Iseka and frequently used by local residents. Additionally, the location was just 100 meters from a railway station, adding another layer of detail to the circumstances surrounding the incident. Nonetheless, despite being a relatively residential area, the events at the murder site did not go unnoticed. Numerous witnesses became aware of what had happened. Shortly after the incident, the police gathered enough testimony to create a fairly detailed composite sketch of the suspect. According to eyewitness accounts, the perpetrator was a young man between 20 and 30 years old. He wore black clothing both on top and bottom. His appearance was strikingly unusual. His eyes seemed unfocused, suggesting he might have been under the influence of alcohol or drugs. He was of average height, estimated to be between 170 and 180 centimeters. His hair was styled in what resembled a parted fifth fashion, with a sharp middle part. The man was riding a black bicycle equipped with a basket, typical of Japanese mamachari bicycles, often used in everyday life, especially in rural and urban areas. At the crime scene, traces of the perpetrator were also found. His shoe size was estimated to be between 270 and 280 millimeters. Interestingly, the shoes were hiking boots of foreign origin. This detail became another key piece of information in the effort to identify the suspect. Once all these facts were gathered, the police were able to create a highly accurate composite sketch of the suspect. Additionally, a reconstruction of the events was produced and uploaded to the official police website. The video reenactment was highly detailed but also somewhat disturbing, which only added to the tension surrounding the case. At the time of the investigation, the location of the crime was open and relatively accessible for observation, including by those passing along the road. Additionally, there were quite a few witnesses near the scene who could potentially assist in the investigation. These factors initially created an expectation that the perpetrator would be apprehended quickly. However, despite all the police's efforts, the perpetrator was not captured, and his trail vanished. By that point, the police had conducted extensive searches, involving around 58,000 personnel, and receiving over 1,000 tips from the public. Yet none of the leads yielded a definitive result. The situation became so convoluted that authorities began facing accusations of inefficiency, particularly from local residents, who expressed frustration and disbelief over why the culprit remained at large. Dalia stimulirowania poiska bila objawlena samaya wysokaya nagrada, kotaraya kogda libo bila predlożena w Japonii. 3 miliona ien, primerno 33 tysiaci dolarów. Za informację, kotaraya mogla by privestik poimke prestupnika. No, nezmotria na eto, rasledowanie zastoporilos, a prestupnik versetakse ostawalsia na swobode, wyzywaya u obszczestvenosti wysybolszewo prosowi somneni. However, 14 years have passed since the incident, and as of 2021, the case remains unsolved. The family of the deceased, as well as the students and faculty at Seika University, have not lost hope in finding the perpetrator and have made their own efforts to push the investigation forward. Chiba Daisaku grew up in a single-parent household, helping his mother from a young age by working part-time delivering newspapers. Through perseverance, he managed to gain admission to the university after 2 years of preparation, making his achievement all the more significant. These details of his life story only deepened the public's sorrow and sympathy for his tragic fate. Chiba's classmates remembered him as a friendly, compassionate, and deeply passionate student of manga. One of Chiba's professors, the renowned manga artist and university professor Sasu Akira, remarked, "January 15th comes back every year, but time stopped 10 years ago," expressing his grief over the tragedy. Alongside his students, Sasu created a special manga anthology dedicated to the case. The anthology chronicled Chiba's life, his personality, the details of the case, and even included the composite sketch of the perpetrator. The idea was to use manga, something Chiba deeply loved, as a medium to seek justice and honor his memory. Chiba's classmates actively preserved his memory, sharing illustrations and stories about their late friend on social media. In 2020, on the 13th anniversary of his death, Chiba's family, university faculty, and local residents held a memorial ceremony. During the event, it was revealed that Chiba's mother, Mrs. Junko, continued to distribute the composite sketch of the suspect and information about the case, tirelessly seeking justice. Despite the many years that had passed, she refused to give up. Meanwhile, various theories emerged in Japan regarding the identity of the perpetrator. The most common hypothesis suggested that the murder was an impulsive act committed by someone with a mental illness. It was speculated that the killer might already be incarcerated or institutionalized in a psychiatric facility, which could explain his disappearance. This theory seemed plausible to many and bore similarities to the case of Lee Chun-jae, the infamous South Korean serial killer linked to the Hwaseong murders. However, despite extensive efforts and numerous hypotheses, Chiba Daisaku's killer was never identified, leaving the case as one of modern Japan's most perplexing tragedies. Another hypothesis centers around the striking resemblance between the suspect in Chiba's murder and Matsuoka Yusuke, a suspected perpetrator implicated in a high-profile case involving a murder at a Japanese daycare center. Some speculated that the two cases might be connected and that Chiba's murder could be one of Matsuoka's crimes. However, no evidence has yet been found to confirm this theory. Returning to the events of that fateful night, the behavior of the perpetrator is worth revisiting. After the attack, he sat on the road, seemingly in a state of shock, watching Chiba die. This led to a new theory. Perhaps after realizing what he had done, the perpetrator took his own life. Supporters of this theory argue that it would explain why, despite extensive searches over 14 years, the individual has never been found. The death of 20-year-old Chiba Daisaku, a young manga student full of dreams, remains one of the most tragic chapters in modern Japan. It is important to note that his family, friends, and university continue their pursuit of justice to this day. At the site of the tragedy in Kyoto, a banner remains displayed, drawing attention to the case. Its presence serves as a solemn reminder to passers-by of the unsolved murder that remains a painful wound for Chiba's loved ones, as though it happened only yesterday. While for some it may seem like an old, forgotten crime, for those close to Chiba, the tragedy remains very much alive. It continues to bring pain, forcing them to endlessly seek answers to questions that may never find resolution.